Alright, today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to do a video review of a rewilding cult that I've been aware of for the last couple years and have been growingly concerned with their dangerous narrative that domesticated humans can revert back to foraging off the land and like a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, which is completely untrue. There's the most accomplished hunter-gatherers and foragers like Matt Graham and Lynx Valden have been documented. I mean, Alone and all these survival shows have proven that man can't go very long with those old ways, primarily because it's not so much the knowledge, because that can be learned. It's primarily the animal population has been depleted so much that a hunter-gatherer lifestyle is no longer possible, because hunter-gatherer lifestyles consisted of primarily eating meat. And this cult, their narrative is dangerous because they have inverted that and are acting like natives subsisted mainly on plants, and therefore we have the ability to for that to be a sustainable food freedom possibility. And it's not. It's misleading people. And furthermore, they're advocating that people try this where they're trying it, which is they're not trying it. They're just cosplaying and claiming things that are completely untrue, and they're not even trying to back up with any type of food freedom challenges or anything like that. Like so many other YouTubers, these people are just claiming that they can do these things and that you should come out and come under their wing, their tutoring and their cult. And they're spinning people out on acid and manipulating their minds into going along hook, line, and sinker with their narrative. Mainly young, impressionable people that they have been targeting through the LGBTQ community, because the cult leader is a biological male that has renamed herself Finn. They've done a lot of damage, and this first video is an interview that one of her friends put together, one of her more savvy friends and more based and clear-minded. He wasn't completely, his mind wasn't completely taken over by her, and so he has done the most unwinding from her conditioning, it seems. And so he set up this interview with 6 of her other friends, and they tell the truth in many parts of this 2-hour-long interview or something like that. And so I pulled out the parts that were being the most honest about her, and so you can see in a timely fashion the real character of this person, because what's remaining in here, you can see how much they are still justifying it, and the rest of the interview was nothing but gross justifications. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I speak with 6 people who knew Phoenicia Madrana. I did not talk to any of her haters, but none of the people you're about to hear from were blind to her characteristics, and the picture that emerges here can certainly not be described as fun. Granny had the personality of a cult leader, magnetic and domineering.
She was a cult leader.
Captivating and manipulative, seductive and egotistical. She would draw you in with flattery one minute, seeming empathy the next, and connivance after that. Regardless, the goal was the same, to get you on her side. What exactly that entailed was not always clear, and was certainly not written in stone, but from Granny's standpoint, it was her against the world. One day in the summer of 2012, when describing what it was like working with the young people who came around to meet her, she said, "It's like sifting through human garbage. I could only take Granny in small doses, a few days here and there."
Followers garbage.
The endless monologue that went on virtually uninterrupted from the time she got up until the time she went to bed was a bit much for me, and I recognized it as a typical cult tactic. When your own thoughts are constantly drowned out, you become easier to manipulate. This is one of many things she did where I was never clear how much she knew what she was doing, how much was old habit, and how much of it was just unconscious.
I mean, she would sometimes dabble with psychedelics, but
all the time. That was her main.
There were times where she was really off, or where
tool.
You know, her version of reality was just
tool.
hers, but she believed that it was like absolutely 100% true, and she would attack people, and so I always warned people, you know, you never know what could happen, and she had been physically abusive sometimes to me and other people that were around, so I was always trying to make sure people knew that they were stepping into a potentially volatile relationship. So yeah, it was really a trip traveling with her, and all the places that I saw being with her were really
literally a trip. Spinning
there
her
were things
followers out on acid.
Prepared. I guess I don't know how to say this.
He doesn't know how to say it without exposing that she was spinning him out.
Took me to worlds that I didn't know existed. I mean, I had vague notions. You know, I knew that there were other cultures, and you know, I grew up in a multicultural family, but the kinds of realities, like the sort of dream time that she would take us into, and the sort of like otherworldly experiences that we would have, they were a little bit shocking. So that was something else that I would tell people, is that she really is sort of like a being who lives between worlds, and she had this way of kind of bridging
reality
the world,
and delusion.
and also, just like Coyote was very creative and
Coyote is a Native American character
us, that was also really
they used to justify
a lot of ways
her actions.
Fucking with people's heads.
She's just Coyote.
Kind of manipulating people. And eventually I realized that her behavioral patterns, even though I have such great respect for her, that she really does match the diagnosis of a sociopath. And I don't really like conventional psychological diagnosis, so I wouldn't ever say, oh, Tanisha's a sociopath. But some of those characteristics really match.
That'll become clear.
Her patterns of behavior, and it's useful to know. Just like, okay, you're dealing with somebody who's like has no reservations about manipulating you for her purpose, which in a lot of ways
that's the definition of
amazing. And
cult leader.
So people got really hurt in the mix. So yeah, it was a really mixed bag. She was trying to kind of recruit. She would come and just start kind of shouting. Like as soon as she got there, she'd be shouting and kind of talking this, especially when I met her, she didn't really talk like normal conversation at all. So it was all this sort of, I used to call it prophecy speak, because she was sort of talking almost like a preacher, but in this very kind of...
It's cult talk.
It was kind of like a combination between religious preaching and sort of psychobabble, but also it had this certain kind of coherence, and it was very poetic.
So I'd heard her talk about opening the bundle and being told by Shoshone elders to do so. So that was Clyde.
Her main narrative is that she was the chosen one.
I heard her say different people at different times. The story she told me was that Clyde Hall told her that it was time, you know, according to some of the prophecies that they both learned from Clyde's auntie, who was also one of Phoenicia's teachers. So Clyde,
they were all spun out on drugs.
Had some stories about these prophecies, and he really believed in the two spirits, like the queer kind of Native American traditions. So yeah, Phoenicia, she said for about 2 months she was plotting a way to murder Clyde.
Sorry about that.
And trying to figure out how she could do it without getting caught. And then she had some kind of epiphany, which she never really explained in great detail, but she said then she just kind of flipped and realized, no, that he was absolutely right, and that this was the only way to move forward. In her teepee at night, she would spend a lot of time strategizing about what moves she would make next to sort of stir everybody up and get conflicts going. And she did spend a lot of time trying to stir up conflicts in our own little groups too, and between different people who were doing different kinds of hoop things over the years. And it was always about like sort of this ego thing of who's doing it the best, who's doing it right. And she was always the only one who was doing it right. And then eventually sometimes she would sort of let other people, she would give approval to other people, but only in small ways. and it was always, we were always a failure, and her vision
Just to reel
was
them back
always a
in when she started
failure.
losing them.
And
Compliments
and it
sprinkled
was
in
always
to keep
our
them there.
fault, all of us, all the other people.
This was a hard experience because, Finn, she went off and, did a bunch of meth and came back to the High Desert Wild Tending Network property basically to come down. And this was like against their policy. Like, they actually have a visitor policy that is like a real document that says like because they're a nonprofit, and they're like, we have a policy, like, this place is not a rehab, this place is not where you come to come down, this is like a drug-free zone. And Finn came there to come down, and there was so much tension and friction. Finn was trying to stage a coup and trying to get everybody wrapped up in what she called a hostile takeover of the Sand Crane Center, which, from what I had been told by multiple different people, was not the first time that she had attempted such a hostile takeover.
It's not a very ladylike
the
thing to
humbling
do.
thing about this whole experience, and why there was so much friction, and why
Never heard of anything
really
so aggressive
made me take a step
coming from a
back
woman.
and not, demonize what Finn was doing, was I just saw how vulnerable Finn was.
And blow over it did.
Making excuses for her.
At some point later, at least a few months later, though maybe it was a year, we met again, and it was okay. We found some kind of even keel. I knew that she was a con artist, and she knew that I knew. And what's more, she knew that I didn't mind, that it wasn't a deal breaker, that I accepted her for who she was.
She did mind.
So after
She just
that,
kept
we got
trying to
along
work
fine.
on him.
She didn't try to manipulate me, at least not very hard. And it was the most
Not very
enjoyable
hard.
phase of our relationship yet.
I made exceptions for Finn that I would never make
They
for
all
anyone
made
else.
exceptions. They're still
And,
making exceptions. Excuses.
My one real matter of contention with her was her use of the N-word. And I don't particularly like the word faggot.
She spoke so
but
hatefully.
That was Finn's catch-all, right? I used
So
queer as an
regularly
umbrella
about
term,
so
which
many
bothers
different
some
people.
And Finn used faggot as her umbrella term to refer to the whole LGBTQ rainbow. A lot of the people who I've met who are friends
Even though
with
she was a
her
part of it.
or disciples of her are cishet people
Cis.
who feel comfortable using some of that language because she used it.
No.
I needed to be able to walk alongside her with my ways being okay to do, like, without having to fight all the time if I wasn't gonna pick up the gun and shoot somebody or whatever, and metaphorically. She never tried to force me to murder, but she talked
Tried to
about it a
convince him.
lot. And eventually I just told her, like, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna pick a side and start, fighting the way that you're fighting. Like, I have a different
Good for
purpose
you.
in this, and if you can't respect that, then we can't walk together. Like, we can be doing it in our own ways. And the way that really kind of came to a head was, there was this place called the Sand Crane Sanctuary that she was there for several years, but the guy who was buying it for us, he eventually, he was closer to her age, and he had a lot of criticisms toward her about how she was relating with the younger folk. He eventually just, enforced it and asked
'Cause
her
he's
to leave.
older.
And so she decided that she was at war
Not
with
as manipulatable.
Sand Crane, and started making a lot of threats on the internet about, like, basically she was going to turn us into the FBI for this or that. She was going to call the cops on us. She was going to, like, get a hitman on somebody. Some of these things were rumors. Some of them were things that she actually was saying herself. And she was accusing the elder who was living there of raping people. And I was there at the time when this was all happening, and I was asking, like, the people she was saying had said that they were raped and all this stuff, if that was true, and how they felt about their names being, projected in this way. And it was all just lies. It was all bullshit and just games that she was playing with people's heads, and basically I came to this point where I just said, Grandma, I can't support you in this. Like, I told her, you can't use me anymore as a pawn in your warfare. I'm not going to play along anymore, because I had definitely enabled it at times. I had enabled her abusive behaviors. I'd let her hit me, things like that, and sort of let her get away with it. Even though we would talk about it and we would resolve things, it was always sort of, she was on top, like whatever she said goes. And at
She
that
would
point,
resolve
I
it.
just said, you know what, I'm walking my own way. Like, thank you for everything you taught me. I don't expect anything from you. You do you. Like, I really respect you as you are, but I can't just pretend like this is okay. Like, you can't just attack all these people who have been giving us so much. I mean, they were still, at the time that this was happening, they
She's
were still
guilt tripping
sending her
white
so
people
many
into giving
supplies,
huge
so much money,
donations,
these elders that she was attacking, you know.
claiming to
it
be
was
part of
like
Native
maybe
American,
my
like,
4th or 5th time on a
I don't know.
horse that we were
Native American
leaving, and I
narrative.
was put in charge of a
Help.
5-horse pack.
it's all virtue signaling to get huge
going
donations.
down the steep grade in Eastern Oregon. I ended up
She
getting
put
off of the horse
this
'cause I felt
lady
a little better, and then trying to
at
lead
the
them
lead
that way, and
to
it was
lead the
just
pack
a little,
string.
pretty
She was
terrifying,
inexperienced.
actually, be going down that grade. But we made it to the bottom, and I was having trouble being
Which is
on
really
the old
irresponsible
horse
and dangerous.
Vitiligo. He's a super sweet guy, but you know, I know that there was a lot of my chemistry going on there, where it's just that I'm making them more skittish because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm afraid.
Super dangerous.
But I remember getting off, and Finn was in a truck, I think my truck, and she pulled alongside, wondering what the problem was, you know. And I said, I'm just really
weird.
not in charge here, and I want to stop, you know. I don't want to do it. And she was fucking furious. She was like, "Get back on that horse, bitch, or go home." And I was like, "Okay, I'll go home." And she was like, "Get back on the horse, bitch."
No, go home.
I was terrified, and so I got back on the horse because I didn't really feel like I had a choice at that moment. I think maybe she slapped me once too. I mean,
laughing
it
about
sounds
it.
horrible, right? But they trucked the horses.
It
out.
is horrible.
Yeah. And she got a ride with them, and we were going to follow her. And it was just like still a little too fresh for me, so I just wanted to take a night, you know. So I wanted to just take a night in camp on the way up there. And I remember she was so mad about that. And there was no room to express the frustration I was feeling or the vulnerability I was feeling, and how I just needed a moment, and that I wasn't actually leaving her in a lurch. She was landing at friend's place, like everything was fine, you know. And I remember being so frustrated about that. It took a couple days to prepare to go over to where she was, and I was going to meet her all prepared to just be like, "Hey, like, what the fuck? Like, I need to be recognized here a little bit for my vulnerability." And I remember she just looked at me before I could say anything when I saw her. She's watching TV. She said, "You know, I'm way more interested in this fucking cartoon than I am in any of your feelings."
My issue with a lot of Finn's message is how, in so many ways, unrealistic
It was
is.
completely
And
unrealistic.
This is what I mean.
And dangerous.
I don't mean that
live
reciprocity
off
is
forage.
unrealistic. I mean that Finn's lever
Planting.
was guilt.
Planting back and planting,
And that's how she
guerrilla gardening.
got to people, was through guilt. And
Can't live off of guerrilla gardens
conscience,
in the woods.
You know, so she used a lot of like virtue signaling and moral
That's all
high
she did.
ground and, in my opinion, false moralities to
Mm-hmm.
justify her behavior. But the thing about that guilt that backfired on a lot of the people who have spent time with Finn was that she put this pressure and used social media, and her whole like she was always talking about mind control and social engineering, and this is stuff I've spent a lot of time like deconstructing in myself and deprogramming from, because when you hear it enough times from Finn, it's like advertising. It just
It's
sticks
brainwashing,
in your head.
especially when you're on
And
acid.
it's almost like you
spun
think
out.
it against your own will, and that's what kind of like I was like, God, Finn, you know, it's like, knock that shit off. You know, it's like I did not consent to that, because I do believe that she knew what she was doing in doing that. Like Finn had a
Fully.
gift for psychology and predicting people's behaviors and manipulating people. It's like she was anti-capitalism, but it's almost like one of the basic tenets of capitalism snuck into her work and into her work ethic. Part of hanging out with her was basically like, you need to be doing this all day, every day, and you need to be posting it on Facebook and Instagram all day, every day. And that whole
To
idea
build her
of Finn,
following and
that, like, it
to
puts
rationalize
this
getting more
pressure on you
donations
to
from rich
basically
people.
measure your self-worth as a human by like how many seeds you're planting all the time. It kind of feeds into this guilt complex that she really liked to use to leverage people.
And she had a few friends with her that were meth heads, and as far as the rumors go and as far as people who hung out with her in the last years of her life, supposedly she was doing a lot of meth. And that time she definitely was. I would come visit her in camp and she'd be grinding her teeth and her eyes would be bugging out and she'd be like, I know I look like a fucking crackhead. And, you know, that's what she said to me. And I was like, it's okay, Grandma. I know what you're into. It's, you know, I still love you. It's fine.
It's
and
not
so she was
it's
playing
not
real
okay.
nice.
It's not
And we
fine.
had
You can love her, but
probably
it's
3 or
not
4
fine.
days where she would little by little spend more and more time with us. And we invited her to come eat with us. And we fed her some meals. And it was sweet. And then the last day, she rolled up first thing in the morning. She had her camp all packed up into her truck, and she just started ranting at us about all this stuff that I don't really know where she came up with it, but she just really decided she needed to fight with us. And one of my friends who was there, he just started, you know, fighting back defensively, and it turned into such a big blow up for like maybe
Because he wasn't
45
in
minutes.
the cult.
Oh no.
It was really
He
bad.
wasn't a follower.
Right.
And it left everybody just really shaken. And I was trying to de-escalate, and it really didn't go anywhere good. And she eventually just left real frustrated. And I walked her out of the camp.
Let her go.
'cause she had parked a ways away, and I walked her to her car.
Why give
And
her
the
another
whole way we
opportunity
were
to
walking,
manipulate you?
She just listed everything that had gone wrong in her life, and that I was the reason why. That I was the reason why her life was so fucked. It was my fault specifically. And I actually spent maybe 3 days really thinking about that. Like, did I do that to her somehow without realizing it? And I just couldn't make sense of it. I tried really hard to understand. You know, the stuff that she accused me of was real specific, and none of it was my fault. It was all just stuff that mostly she had done to herself.